Good morning, everybody. I'm absolutely delighted to be holding this webinar. I hope that you will benefit from it and that you'll hear some new ideas, some new perspectives on activities with older people and those living with the dementia. My interest in older people goes back to the time when I was 7 or 8 years of age, and we lived with my grandmother. And I was very, very close to her. I got on really well with her, and she was an absolute guiding force in my life, I think. You know, really appreciated who she was and how she lived. And I grew to have the same interests that my grandmother had. She's terrifically interested in gardening. She loved music and playing the piano. She had been a teacher all her life, so she had a strong interest in, you know, education and doing well and living a good life, I suppose. So her name was Florence Walsh, and I was very influenced by her growing up, I must say, really was. I also remember neighbours that I was very impressed by that lived nearby. And even as a young child, I noticed that older people don't get the attention sometimes that they deserve. I wonder if you find that they don't really get the attention that's due to them, or the respect that's due to them. They're kind of pushed aside. I notice when you meet an older neighbor, they're always apologizing for stopping you and taking your time. And that's a pity. You know, that's terrible. They've lived their life, they've paid their taxes, and they have so much to give us. So I've thoroughly enjoyed working very closely with older people for the last 15 years. And before that, in fact, they've always been a really big part of my life. So, you know, my basic education was in science. I studied biochemistry and botany, and I was very interested in those things, particularly in the working of biochemistry and the working of the body in relation to diet, in relation to hormones, in relation to things like aging. I was always very interested, and that was very useful when I started studying a couple of years ago in nature therapy. That was very useful, and it's very useful now with the coronavirus to understand the little, you know, differences out there. Anyway, after I studied that, I went teaching, and I worked in Airfield in Dundrum as a nature guide. And at that time, we had older people coming as well as school children. And of course, I realized very quickly how important reminiscence was for these older people, looking back and remembering and, you know, touching a leaf and it connecting them back to a time and a place in their life. That was really remarkable. So I just wanted to say that I think that it was very interesting when I first went in to do work and do some activities. I went in first to a nursing home to do nature art, and I was surprised at how few people were engaged in activities. I just couldn't get over it. I looked around the nursing home and I found that a lot of people were sitting alone at their lunch and their dinner. And if not alone, they weren't talking to the people beside them. And I was really, really upset by that. And I said, if I have any opportunity, I'm going to change that. I'm going to try as much as I can to get people befriending other people, to get people talking, to get people involved in their daily life here. So anyway, I went on many different courses with Jackie O'Toole and David Sherrod and Bradford University and Dementia Care Matters. And I learned about, you know, what works and what's important to know. At the very same time, my own mother had Alzheimer's disease. She was told at the age of 71 that she had Alzheimer's. And that it would be very slow and that she could enjoy her life and just get on with her life, which she did. And that was really, really fantastic. My mom was able to just live alone for 2 or 3 years, and then with the help of carer and family, and she actually lived 17 years with her Alzheimer's, and we had a fabulous time. I've often given lectures on the subject that it is a joy and a privilege and an opportunity to accompany somebody with a dementia. And I believe that from the bottom of my heart. It really is. It's a joy. It's a joy. It's a privilege to be there for somebody. And it's an opportunity also. It's a great opportunity. You don't know what doors it might open for you. So here goes. What I want to start with is the notion that the most important thing when we're trying to bring joy to another person or delight, to enhance their life in some way, is we have to understand what's that about. First of all, we have to understand ourselves. We have to understand what makes me happy. What makes me happy? So I have a little exercise, and I hope you might do it here yourself. You don't need a pen or paper. You can if you want, but you don't. And here's the exercise. It's a little reflection. I'm going to ask you to do it. So you ask yourself, first and foremost, was there a time in my life that I remember that I didn't like very much? I go back in my memory to that time, and I remember the people who were there and the place. And I remember how I felt at that time. Think about that just for some time, for a few seconds. Now, ask yourself, would you like to go back to that time? Don't think so. Would you like to go back to that place? No, because it wasn't a good feeling. So we leave that and we move forward into the positive and into the joy. Now, if you can focus on a time in your life where you were magnificent, where everything was lovely, a time when you were very, very happy. Just if you can put a picture on that, where was that place? Who were the people who were there? And the circumstances. And I want you, if you can, to think of the feelings that well up inside you when you remember that place and that time. Think of those feelings. And I'm going to ask you to put words on those feelings. So I'll let you think about that. And we can share the words. Okay, so if you're able to use the chat function, you might put some words in. How did you feel at that time? Happy? Safe? Relaxed? Important? Excellent? Free? Content? Connected? Accepted and fulfilled, peaceful, confident, wanted, secure, empowered, wonderful, happy, warmth, at peace, powerful, beautiful, calm, lovely, joyful, happy, loved, appreciated, hugged, safe. Okay. That's the most important part of today's session. Content. Yes. Accepted. All these wonderful, wonderful words. You felt just like you were in heaven. You felt fantastic. I can share a little story. When I had my first child, Hannah, who's now an artist, I was in Holles Street, and I was told I had a cesarean and I had a tough time, but I was told, I looked at the baby and I just said, my God, she's the most beautiful baby in the whole world. And I have produced her. The nurses told me there was never a more beautiful baby ever in the whole time they ever lived or worked in Hollis Street. They probably say that to every mother, but I totally believed it, and I was filled with joy, overflowing, and I didn't mind that I had a cesarean section or anything. Fantastic. So when we're at our happiest, that's like pure heaven. It's a fantastic feeling. And that is the feeling that we want to leave our residents with every day. Every time we pass a resident or we visit our patient or our grandmother or whoever, we want the person to feel richer, to feel content, to feel secure, dignity. We want them to feel respected, trusted, loved, cared for, worth something. We want them to know that their opinion matters, that we're really interested in what they think about things. We want to leave them happier, richer, healthier, and more secure by our intervention with them. And how are we going to do that? We start with ourselves. Before we go to work in the morning or go out for the day, we take a look at ourselves and we say, now, am I fit for the job in hand, which is the greatest of all calling, to bring love to another human being? Am I fit for this? And if you've been drinking all night and you haven't been sleeping, and if you've been doing bad things, whatever they are, you're not fit to go to work. You should just stay at home. You need to be in the right place. You need to have energy. You need to be showered and washed. You need to be looking forward to your job. You need courage. Courage. And the original meaning of the word courage is full-hearted. Full-hearted. You need to feel generous. You need to feel excited about your work. And the best nurses, the best teachers, the best social workers, the best carers are people who are really passionate about what they do, really excited about it. They say, do you know what? I was at the charity shop on Saturday and I got the most wonderful bag of things. We're going to have so much fun. You know, it's a person who thinks about their residents last thing at night, first thing in the morning. They care. They really care. There's a lovely line of a poem. It was in that film Birdman, if you remember. And it is called Late Fragment. And what did you get from this world even so? Did you get what you wanted from this world? I did. And what did you want? To feel myself loved, to feel beloved on this earth. So that's our job, to make a person feel beloved on this earth. That's irrespective of the type of life that they had or what they did or didn't do. It's not our job to make a judgment. It's not our job to feel appalled by somebody's physical presentation. It's not our job to feel impatient if they continuously ask us the same question. It's our job to be loving, to be there, and to aid and support their life and their day in every way that we possibly can. So it's a big ask, but there are a lot of things that make it easy and make it fun. And I want to share those with you, please. The first thing is, as I say, it starts with yourself. It's about being mindful. It's about understanding the difference between just doing something and doing it properly. I was shopping there a couple of weeks ago in Lidl, and I had just 2 or 3 things. And as the girl lifted up my different items to put them over the scanner, She lifted each one with great attention. She looked at the item, a loaf of bread or whatever it was, and she carefully scanned it, bing, and placed it down very gently and very carefully. And as I saw her, I immediately said, that's how we're supposed to live. Mindfully, deliberately, paying attention. And I really believe that. It's also the way that brings inner peace to us. It makes us happy. It makes us calm, brings all our stress hormones down. Very, very important to be able to give direct attention to a person or to an activity. Means that we bring our calmness, we bring ourselves right into that. For better or for worse, we're there. We're accompanying that person. They can't feel lonely when we're there. They're going to end up with some of those lovely feelings that we talked about. Okay. So being mindful, very important. That means when you're on the bus or driving the car on the way to work, you go over in your mind the details, because you have your own life. You have to leave your own life outside. You remember the details. You say, oh gosh, I wonder how she got on the weekend. I wonder, did he see his family? I wonder, did Jimmy water those plants? Whatever it is, we get ourselves back into the zone just as we're coming back into work. And we remember the important things. The important things are that we need to be in a good place. We're going to need a lot of support during our day. And we're going to need other things too. So hopefully by the time we arrive in work, we have our plan. We have a notebook and a pen or pencil. And we have a bag of activities. We always have to have a bag. And it also creates mystery as well, to come in and have something that we are going to open up and reveal like a present for the day. Now, as we arrive into work, the very first thing is the pacing. As we walk in, it's a terrible mistake to run past your residence, even if you're busy and you've got so many things to do. That's wrong. I believe that's wrong. You see, if we keep working faster and faster, trying to please the boss by getting through, as they say, so many different residents, we're going to end up shooting ourselves in the foot. But if we go in with love in our heart, with a good plan for the day, everything will happen. The people will be happy. The families will be happy. Everything will work out. It's most important that we pace ourselves. A resident has been sitting there maybe for 3 hours when you arrive in. Maybe she got up at 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the morning and she's sitting there. Nobody has paid her any attention. Maybe the cleaner was mopping the floor around her feet and she's feeling like an old rubbish bag. Well, that's the time for us to spend 20 or 30 seconds just touching her shoulder and saying, how are you doing, Kathleen? You are looking so well today. Did you have a good night's sleep? Even if the person cannot answer us, they will pick up the feeling. As we were saying earlier, the feeling is the important thing. The feelings matter most. If anybody hasn't watched David Sherrod videos on Dementia Care Matters, would be a good idea to watch his videos. Feelings matter most. David Sherrod, SHERRARD. Dementia Care Matters. Yeah, feelings matter most. So we say then, Kathleen, I need to start my work. I will be back soon to see you. And of course, if you say that, you must do it. There was a man who used to sit at the front door in the Royal Hospital in Donnybrook many years ago, and everybody would say, hi, Jimmy, and walk past. How are you, Jimmy? How are you, Jimmy? And he said, do you know what? I wish somebody would stop and ask me that question sincerely. How are you, Jimmy? Because I want to tell them the answer. But very often we don't have the time, we just rush on. So then we get into our plan for the day, and hopefully we're working someplace where there is an activity planner there on the wall, and we know what is planned. And I want to say to you that over these sessions, I'm going to be looking at seasonal activities, and I'm going to be looking at different areas that come up that might help people when they are sorting out their activities. But the first things first, the most important thing is how you come into your job and how you are in yourself and how you are focused on the feelings of those people who you meet. Most important. That is the key element to giving joy to other people and delight, is to totally bring the joy in yourself. This session is the first session of 6, and it's called Frozen in Time. And the reason it's called that is because one of the most important things when we're putting on a session for older people is the seasonal element. It's very important for a person who's living indoors a lot of the time, or maybe in a care setting or wherever, to understand what time of year it is, because that gives great orientation to the person. So if you know, in January and February, we possibly have snow and ice. It's really, really good to have something like these on the window or around in the environment. And even to have some things that are left over from Christmas, like twigs with snow on them, in a vase. It's very, very good to have reminders about the weather around, and reminders about the month that we're in and what we're looking forward to and all of that. We had a session a couple of weeks ago called in a similar vein, and it was very interesting because we started off with the idea that people maybe could remember a big snow. There was a huge snowfall in 1947. Now that's a long time ago, right? 47. But there were some people who still remembered or heard about it from their mother or father. The snow in January in 1947 was so severe that nobody could go anywhere or could get any food. It was absolute total lockdown, much worse than we have now. It was really, really dreadful. But people love to talk about the past, and many can talk about the famine that we had in Ireland in 1845. They remember that time in Ireland. We've heard about it through school, where there was nothing. There was no food. People were starving. They had big families. It was very difficult. But a lot of people don't know that before the original famine, there was another famine in Ireland 100 years before 1845, in 1745. And this was called Arctic Ireland. And I read about it quite a bit. And when the snow came down in the beginning, everybody was happy with it. The children were out sliding around and building snowmen, and everybody was eating outdoors. There were pigs put on spits, and there were outdoor activities of all sorts. Because we don't normally get a lot of snow here in Ireland. So it was great. And as the winter went on, the snow did not melt. And into the spring, the snow stayed on the ground. There was no spring and there was no summer at all for 2 years. So it brought huge famine and huge, huge hardship on the people. It was very difficult. Nobody really knows what it was. Maybe it was a volcano or some kind of something that blocked out the sun. Nobody really knows. But it was called Arctic Ireland. And so if we think we're bad now here in the pandemic, we know that we are a race of people that can survive anything. And that's a good feeling. We really can. So when we got talking about about the past, it was very interesting because we had a lot of people in the panel who had very early memories, even though some of their current day memories were very low. Some of them had a lot of memories of their own past. And we were talking about so many things, very interactive. And it's the kind of session that I think is the best session for a winter activity in a nursing home or in a private home. It's to talk about the good old days, you know. And for Irish people, they probably will know a certain amount about that, about schooling and what the farm was like in those days, transport, what the old money was like, what songs were sung. Most of us would know something about the traveling people in Ireland and the church in Ireland and all the rituals and ceremonies and the sodalities and all of that. But if you're not from Ireland, it's very easy to go into the IFI. The IFI is the Irish Film Institute, and you get archive films. And fantastic. You can see films of horse and trap and children wearing petticoats going to school. You can see wonderful films made by David Shaw Smith and his wife. This man died last week. He left us a wonderful selection called Hands, Hands. Hands. Wonderful, wonderful films about crafts in Ireland, from the cooper to the candlestick maker, the bookbinder, the Waterford glass. That man and his wife, they left so much of a legacy for Ireland, particularly now for people who are working here and maybe they're not from Ireland. You know, they can just dip into those series of films. I think there are 24 or something. How many are there? Maybe there are 16. How many are there? Films, and you can see what life was like in Ireland back in the good old days. The recent past, of course, is on YouTube. You can go onto YouTube and you can look at anything. You know, just put in YouTube Irish dancing in the rural parts, or Kerry dancing, or Sean-nós singing in County Clare. There's just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of things to go into, and it's wonderful. And while I'm on this, I just want to mention that the YouTube videos are fantastic for a virtual tour. You can take a virtual tour every day with your residents or once a week, and you can go anywhere. Like one lady I had wanted to go to Ballycastle up in the north. Another person loved Clifton and just wanted to go to Clifton and walk around. And so what we're trying to get with the reminiscence is we're trying to tick off those things that are most important for the residents in a nursing home. It's to be known, to be understood, to be appreciated, to be recognized. And these things come under 7 or 8 headings. And, you know, they're called the human needs. And I always think of these things every day when I'm doing my work, because if you're doing an activity that's really working well to bring joy and delight and happiness, you're probably ticking a few boxes at the same time. The first one is identity. Identity is terribly, terribly important. And that's the reason why I'm wearing a name badge here, Joyce. You see there? I think it's really important, really, really important that your resident is able to know who you are and to say, oh yeah, I remember her. Yeah, she's the one who does the singing or whatever it is. That they get a good feeling when they see you because you've reminded them with your name. And they can also call you, which is very important. Come over here, Joyce, you know. And likewise, if the resident has their name on them, I think it's fantastic. I really, really advocate it, particularly for group activities, gardening activities, art activities, concerts, quizzes. You know, I think it's really, really, really great if the resident decides that, yes, they'd be happy to wear their name badge, because identity is terribly important. We had one lady and she said, oh yes, my name is Margaret. Well, it's actually Marguerite. That means pearl, little pearl. She loved telling the story that her name was not just Margaret, it was Marguerite, you know. She was given it by her grandmother. You know, she loved that. Our identity is the number one thing. Integration with other people is also really top of the list. Now, not everybody is extrovert. Some people are introvert and they prefer to spend quite a bit of their time alone. They want to read. They want to sit in the corner. They want to sit in their room. That is perfectly their entitlement to do that. But most people do want to feel integrated into the group where they live or the population where they live. And if you're in a foreign country and you don't speak the language, you know what it feels like. You feel like you're the outsider. And if you were suddenly needy, there'd be nobody there for you. So to feel integrated is very important. The way you can do that, of course, is even if a person doesn't join an activity, they will still have their plant or their serviette or whatever. They will still have their name out there. Their name is in the pot, you know. And very often a person like that might be very reflective. They might be a reader. They might be have a font of information about fishing or horseback riding. And the time will always come when you can call on their expertise and say, Marjorie, could we ask you just one question about the blackbird? Is the female blackbird brown? Margie will be delighted to say, oh yes, did you not know that? Yes, the male is black, but the female is brown. And all of a sudden, Marjorie is now integrated into the group. Really important. Identity, integration, intellectual needs. Now, our intellectual needs are, when we get up in the morning, my mother used to say, oh, I read my Irish Times every day. You know, even though she really wasn't making much sense of it. Very important. Intellectual needs. And the best way for us to support that, without a doubt, is to ask a person their opinion about things. You really want to know their opinion about things. And even if they are not, if they're cognitively impaired and they find it difficult, you still ask their opinion, you value their opinion. And they might just shake their head or something. It's fantastic to get a person integrated. Identity, integration, intellectual needs. Then there are sensory needs. And as we get older and as we move into cognitive impairment, we very often have sensory deprivation. And so we need to strengthen that. We need to make sure that in our surrounds, we have maybe something that is very interesting to look at, our environment. So we put things in the environment that stimulate the senses. This was made by the residents, little rolls of wool. We put things around that are good to feel, they're good to look at. We put up pictures, we put up things that get conversation going. Stimulate the senses. Obviously, we can have things that have lovely smells. We can have music. We can stimulate the senses, very important. Sensory needs. Then outside of that, we have our needs for socialization. We have a need for fun, and we need to remember a sense of humor, take ourselves, lightly. And that can be done in many, many ways, the sense of humor, how to get that. We come back to those activities. Then there's self-esteem, very important, that a person feels very happy with who they are and, that they've made a good choice of clothes. So it's a terrible thing when you hear a carer saying to somebody, Mary, that cardigan is terrible over that dress. Dreadful. We mustn't do that. We must always encourage. We must always bring the person up higher and bring them out and, look at their choices. We must provide advocacy, listen to them, let them know that we're listening to them. So, of course, they have their physical needs, I didn't mention at the top of the list, but those are the needs that are generally looked after by the nursing home. The need for touch, the need for feeding, for going to the toilet, for all the physical needs, sleep and whatever, fluid intake. They're normally looked after by by other people. But our job in activities is to add to the psychological needs of the person, to bring joy and delight. Now, I want to just talk a little bit about this in a little bit of depth. Going back to you again, we talked there about the feelings of when you were very, very happy and how you might bring that into your job at work. Let's just talk, ladies and gentlemen, about the situation that we find ourselves in. That at the moment we've had a pandemic for nearly a year. It is my opinion, as it might be yours, that we looked after our older people very, very, very poorly in this country. You know, we saw it coming. We should have been better prepared. There should have been more training. There should have been more PPE and all of that. Even families didn't know how to behave. I think some families felt they should take their loved ones out of nursing homes and bring them home. It was a very difficult time. And during it, there was such an amount of uncertainty around and fear. And the wearing of masks meant that there was none of the normal body language communication with carers and with family. So it's been a very lonely time for a lot of people. I found in my 15 years working as activity coordinator in this big home that people wanted to know when somebody died. They really did. Because I suppose they all felt that they themselves were going to die and possibly die in that nursing home or there. And they wanted to know what it would be like. You know, it's strange, but they were getting ready for that. So we found that we always told the residents when somebody passed on, and we told them the story that the family were here and the priest or whatever. And we talked about the person briefly, showed a photograph of the person up on the screen or walked around with it. And then we would sing a song. I used to sing Amazing Grace. And then you'd wrap that up and get on to something more cheerful. But very important. I think people want to know. They haven't been able to see their relatives. That's been really, really important because, as you know, with cognitive impairment, with dementia, people can lose the ability and can lose a skill and maybe cannot get it back again. So, for example, if somebody was playing a little game with their grandchild and they didn't see them for 2 or 3 months, they mightn't remember the little game that they played. They mightn't remember how to do things, how to tie a bow in her hair or something. So it has had a huge impact on families. And I really believe that this is the time that we need to work our way back. We need to reskill ourselves and reskill our residents. So we need to be with the person and we need to give them the feeling that they are perfect the way they are. And the sense of humor is the best of all, my God. For example, the little proverbs and the little things that we remember from childhood, we need to connect with the person. So when my mother died, she was 5 years without language. Even though, the last bit of language that she had, she said some lovely, moving things. She said to me, she said to me one day in the Herbert Park, she said, "You are so beautiful. I think it is your eyes." Isn't that lovely from my mother, you know? Beautiful. I think it is your eyes. You're so beautiful. So the connection is magnificent. But very often the family wants to push it and they're saying, stop talking about the baby. The baby is grown up. So the baby is now 7 or 8. Forget that. Never disagree with somebody. Never cause them more agitation. You know, you have to learn to be a really good liar. You need to lie out of kindness. You need to say everything is fine. The government is paying for all of this and everything is fine. You need to do that because the person is very prone to anxiety. Very, very. They're reading all the signs and they might get it in their mind that they don't like that carer over there. Maybe for very good reasons, or maybe not. Might be a mistake. But whatever it is, the carers need to support one another and have a sense of humor and say, "Do you know what, Linda, she doesn't like you today. If you don't mind, I'll help her with the lunch. She won't like me tomorrow," you know, this kind of thing. We've got to be there for the resident, there for the patient first and foremost, and give them 100%, even when they are exhausting us. And I know well, my mother was repeating for 3 years. 3 years. And I traveled in the car with her, and she'd say, when are we having lunch? When are we having lunch? When are we having lunch? And I realized that she wasn't remembering 3 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 3. She wasn't remembering that. And so I tried singing it, and she'd laugh. And I tried writing it down on cardboard. But what I realized she wanted, like we all want, is a loving connection with me. And so I realized that I needed to come up with a lovely, kind way of answering her question. And that would satisfy her and stop her repeating. So I had to do something that would suit me as well, because you're driving the car and your mother's trying to get out the door and she's asking the same question. So when are we having lunch? When are we having lunch? Here's what I used to do. 3 or 4 or 5, 3 or 4 or 5. And she'd ask again, and I'd go 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock. And what she was getting from me was a lovely, happy answer. She was getting a little bit of singing, and she was getting some information as well. And she would stop. You know, it was fantastic. She would stop the questioning, which was driving me insane, as you can imagine. Sometimes it's more difficult with one's family. The idea with bringing joy and delight is it doesn't matter what we're doing. You could be folding a piece of newspaper and you could be saying to the people, does this remind you of your childhood? You know, and then you get talking about Kilkenny, or you get talking about the fires and sitting around the fire, or the fire irons, and you can have a lot of reminiscence go on. Our people told us fantastic things when we got into reminiscence there recently. They talked about the shops. They talked about the bicycle, picking mushrooms in the field, all sorts of happy, happy memories. And so we remembered to write down what was important for each person. So next time I'm talking to that lady, Mary, I'll talk about Kilkenny and horses. And this person is interested in something else. Fantastic. So we'll be looking at ways to deal with challenging situations. We'll be talking about all sorts of arts and crafts and gardening. And we'll be talking about well-being that comes from just being outdoors and being in nature and all of that. It's very important that you have a huge amount of resources. And you can have those resources. Particularly, you can have a lot of things on YouTube, as I said, just wonderful. But mostly it comes back to nurturing the individual. Anything for a person in isolation or for a person who sits on their own and doesn't seem to get involved is something that is well thought out. It has to be something that really matters to a person. It could be a color, like I, for example, love the color pink. It just cheers me up. So it could be a combination of things like hand massage, and there's wonderful hand massage videos on YouTube that are 6 or 7 minutes long. That could be hand massage. It could be a particular podcast or a particular program on the radio. It could be a blanket, a silk scarf around the neck, or an activity like folding serviettes in the room, peeling apples. All sorts of activities can happen in the person's room. Really, everything can happen in the person's room. Dolls, some people love those dolls that come from different countries, you know, all lined up. A person can do anything in their own bed and in their own room, but it needs to be set up very carefully so that when you're away from the room, they don't put the sponge in their mouth or, you know, hurt themselves in any way. You need to consider health and safety. But what you really need to do is get the key from me for each person and know exactly what are the things for each person. Because everybody listening to this at the moment, we're all different people. And if you're in a nursing home situation, you need these things supplied for you from the family, but mostly from you. You're going to have to supply whatever it is, you know, to that person. So that's really, really important. It's amazing how giving something to somebody is a wonderful thing to do. I always do it when I go in. I have things to hand out. you know, serviettes and little bits of greenery out of the garden and that sort of thing. You come to somebody and bring them something and whisper sweet words to them, you know. It's really good. You can have a different relationship with everybody out of 20 in a room. You can say, you know, Margaret, you have the best hair in this whole place. Or you can say, Mary, thank you for helping. You know, you're such a thoughtful person. Anything that encourages them. I'm going to be very hands-on and very practical from now on. You're going to have all sorts of links and connections and books, all sorts of things, because there's a lot of stuff. But I wanted the first session to be frozen in time. Remember that this person with dementia is very often frozen in time and they need thawing out. And we're the people to thaw them out, and we're the people to reinvigorate them and bring back happiness to them, bring back good times, bring back calm, bring back sunshine into their life, you know. Get them out now as soon as possible into the fresh air, wrapped up really well. We mind them, we show them things. We get photographs of them in the outdoor and photographs of them sowing seeds. And we pour hope on them. By God, they need it.